Welcome to the GMAT Strategy Podcast. You're here because you believe there's a better way to study for the GMAT, and so do we. We created the GMAT strategy to maximize your results and minimize your effort so you can get to the fun parts about business school and life as quickly as possible. My name is Isaac Puglia, and I've been teaching GMAT classes and tutoring privately for the GMAT for almost a decade, and I've achieved a 99th percentile score on the GMAT and helped thousands of students get into the business schools of their choice. I'm excited to be a part of your MBA journey since we all at TGS think our world can benefit from the best possible business leaders that we can find. If this show is bringing you value, please share it with your friends and family who are studying so that together we can make this process as easy and as painless as it can possibly be. Let's go. Welcome to lesson 2 of GMAT Math Basics. Today, I want to talk about operations. Before we jump into the lesson, let's start with a brief quiz. Question 1. What are the 4 basic operations we can perform on numbers? Second, how would you define addition? What is addition? Question 3. What do we call the result of addition? Question 4. How would you define subtraction? Question 5. What do we call the result of subtraction? Question 6. How do we depict subtraction visually? If I want to subtract one number from another, how do I write that down? Question 7. What is multiplication? How would you define multiplication? Question 8. What is the result of multiplication called? Question 9. How do you represent multiplication visually? If you want to write down multiply 5 by 3, how would you write that? Question 10. What is division? How would you define what division is? Question 11. What do we call the result of division? Question 12. What do we call the thing that is being divided? When we're performing division, what do we call what is being divided? Question 13. What do we call what does the dividing? If we're dividing a number by another number, what do we call the number that is doing the dividing? Let's jump into the lesson. First question, what are the 4 basic operations we can perform on numbers? You've got addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division are the basic building blocks of manipulating numbers. Most complex math concepts are just some version of these operations combined in clever ways. More on that in future lessons. Let's start with addition. What is addition? Addition means you put numbers together into another number. What is the result of addition? The result of addition is called the sum. The sum is the number that all the numbers being added transform into. Addition is kind of like a transformation where we're combining numbers into another number. Think about 10 apples in a basket. If I add 5 apples, the number in the basket is transformed into 15. There are now 15 apples in the basket, and 15 is the sum of 10 and 5. How do we represent addition when we're writing? We use something called a plus sign. This is a vertical line crossed with a horizontal line at a 90-degree angle. And if you're listening, hopefully you can visualize that. That's addition. What is subtraction? Subtraction is taking away numbers from other numbers. If there are 15 apples in a basket and I take away 5, 10 apples remain. When I take numbers away from other numbers, that is called subtraction. What is the result of subtraction called? You'll see this a lot on the exam. The result of subtraction is called the difference. The difference between 15 apples in the basket and 5 that have been removed is 10. 10 is the difference of 15 and 5. Whatever remains after I subtract is called the difference. How do we write subtraction? You use something called a minus sign, which is just a horizontal line between two numbers. It looks kind of like a dash. It's kind of floating between the top of the line and the bottom of the line. If I have 2-3, that usually means 2 minus 3, or take away 3 from 2. Next up, what is multiplication? Multiplication is adding the same number over and over and over and over again. If I want to add 5 apples to the basket 3 times, I would perform the operation 3 times 5, or that can also be expressed as 5 times 3. 3 times 5 or 5 times 3 means add 5 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15, or 3 fives is 15. You can think about adding 5 to itself 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15, so I would be adding 5 3 times, or adding 15 total apples to the basket. That's multiplication, adding the same number over and over again. What's the result of multiplication called? The result of multiplication is called the product. Also heavily tested on the exam. The product of 3 times 5 is 15. How do we represent multiplication when we're writing? There's actually a few different ways. One is an X between two numbers. If you see the number 2, then usually a space, then an X, then usually another space, and then the number 5, so 2x5, that can represent 2 times 5 or 2 multiplied by 5, which equals 10. Usually you move the X up a little bit on the line, similar to the plus and the minus sign we were talking about, so it's not written at the very bottom of the line like the letter X, but it's actually elevated to sort of like the middle of the line, and that denotes that it is not a variable, which we'll get into in a future lesson. It's the operation multiply. That's uncommon on the GMAT. It's uncommon to see the X between two numbers as multiplication, but it is fair game, and so you want to know it. Another common way to represent multiplication is a dot between two numbers. If you're not familiar with the word dot, it's a small filled-in circle that goes in a similar place to the X that we just spoke about. It's not at the bottom of the line like a letter, but it's like floating in between the top and the bottom of the line, if you imagine writing from left to right or right to left on a line. The last way to represent multiplication is using parentheses. If you don't know what parentheses look like, or you're not familiar with that word, it's kind of like 2 bent bars, 2 bent vertical bars. So you imagine like a vertical bar on the line, and then one bends slightly to the left and one bends slightly to the right. The one that bends to the left, where like the middle of the bar gets stretched towards the left side of the page, if you will. It's kind of funny to describe these things verbally. It's actually kind of fun. That's called the open parenthesis, or the start of the parentheses. It usually goes on the left side of whatever you are putting in the middle of the parentheses. And then the one that bends toward the right, where we take the middle of the bar and like pull it toward the right side of the page, that's the end of the parentheses. And if you know the classic smiley emoji, it would be like a colon, which is one dot over another dot, and then the end parentheses, which is like the smiley face. And then the sad version would be the colon with the open parentheses or the left parentheses, and that's the start of the parentheses. A lot of internal debate about whether to include that example in the episode, so definitely send us some feedback if you have any about that, but I thought it was fun, so hopefully you do too. So how does that relate to multiplication? If you see a number in parentheses or some combination of numbers that's and maybe even operations in parentheses, there can be anything inside the parentheses, but then you see another number right to the left of those parentheses, like it's smack up against the open parentheses, kind of like it's snuggling the parentheses, like no space, opposite of space, very close. That's a final way to express multiplication. So for example, if we had 3 open parentheses, 4 close parentheses, that represents 3 multiplied by 4. That's a very common way that you will see multiplication expressed on the exam. So again, 3 ways to express multiplication. I can have 3x4, that's 3 times 4. I could have 3 dot 4, and I can have 3 open parentheses, 4 close parentheses. And that represents that I'm multiplying everything inside the parentheses by 3. Now, sometimes online, because it's convenient for typing, you'll see a star, the star symbol, which if you hit shift and then the number 8 on a typical keyboard, that star can also represent multiplication. But I've never seen that on the exam. The only time I've seen something like that is in like a weird symbol or functions question, which is way beyond the scope of this particular episode on operations. We'll get into those funky symbols at another time. But if you see 3 star 4 online and you're not familiar with that annotation, that means 3 multiplied by 4. So that's multiplication. That's how we represent it. Finally, what is division? How would you define division? Division, to me, is exactly what it sounds like, which is we're dividing things up. If I divide the 15 apples in the basket between 3 people, each person gets 5 apples. What each person gets is usually the result of the division. So we represent that by saying that 15 divided by 3 is equal to 5. Whatever that division winds up being, the result of that division is what we popularly call the result of the division. With division, we're only interested in one of those divisions, though. So a lot of math is built on top of that, and so on the GMAT, we don't really question it. So there's a lot of different ways we could think about division, and no pun intended, divide it up. But that's the way that it is used, and we stick to that convention on the exam. So if we divide something by something else, whatever one unit is of that result, that is the result of division. So again, if I divide 15 apples amongst 3 people, each person gets 5 apples. Whatever each person gets is the result of that operation. If we had 20 apples and we divided it amongst 4 people, we would say the result of that division is 5. 20 divided by 4 is 5. So when we say something like, what is 15 divided by 3, the exam is looking for what would one of those 3 people get. What do we call the result of division? The result of division is called the quotient. Again, you'll see that in questions, and it's very important to know what that means. There's a couple other terms that are worth describing here. The thing that is being divided, 15 in my previous example, is called the dividend. The thing that is doing the dividing, 3 in our earlier example, is called the divisor. And the result is called the quotient. So the divisor divides the dividend and produces the quotient. Might want to listen to that a few times. So let's quiz ourselves on that. What is being divided? That's the dividend. What you're dividing into, or what you are dividing up, is the dividend. What does the dividing? The divisor. The divisor divides the dividend and produces the quotient. Those are the 4 basic math operations. Quick bonus for you here. What's an equals sign? Or how do we express equals? Equals is not really an operation, but it represents the result of an operation. So it's still very related and still very valuable to discuss. Again, we're building up from 0 here, and we'll get to plenty more advanced stuff in the future. But for now, I want to keep it focused on the basics. How do you depict an equal sign when you're writing? It's 2 horizontal bars, one stacked on top of the other. And again, it floats in the middle of the line, a little bit below the top, a little bit above the bottom, usually in the middle. That's operations. Next time, we're going to build on operations by talking about some of the super popular operations, their results, and related concepts that come up a lot on the GMAT. I'm looking forward to it. If you're stuck in the meantime, if you're not seeing the results that you want to see, either in your self-study or with a program that you've been engaging with, and you want to speed up your results with that program or maybe make the switch, then please check out the video on our website about how to reach your dream GMAT score in half the normal time. As always, my greatest hope is that this material will make your studies as easy and as painless as they can possibly be. If you want more tips and strategies for optimizing your performance on the exam, please head to our website, thegmatstrategy.com, which is linked in the description of this podcast or video if you are watching on YouTube, and check out our presentation about how to get your dream score faster. In the meantime, this is a weekly show, so please subscribe, and as always, please stay positive and stay consistent with your studies. Talk to you all soon.